Raise your hand if you have ever found yourself in an endless loop of spinning through the same worries over and over again. My hand is for sure up. Maybe you ruminate negatively by replaying a conversation that didn't go well over and over in your head, like I do, or obsess over a mistake. That never-ending mental loop has a name, and it's called rumination. Welcome to the Cycle of Care podcast. I'm your host, Mona Zignago. Today, we're going to talk about the 4 types of rumination, the never-ending circular thought patterns that can potentially hold all of our cognitive energy hostage. I really want to use today's episode to walk together, shoulder to shoulder, to explore how to understand the different ways we ruminate so we can stop going in circles in our mind and course correct to a solution-oriented, forward-moving direction. There's a lot going on in the world right now. It's easy to lose ourselves in the never-ending rumination death spiral, so I'm going to be vulnerable today and share a really tough personal rumination story. A few years ago, my husband was undergoing some serious pain and needed some pain management to cope with this pain. Unfortunately, pain is a familiar experience to many, not just my husband. Nearly 25% of U.S. adults experience chronic pain, which is defined as pain lasting 3 months or more. Chronic pain is a widespread and growing public health challenge with profound implications for the individuals who are suffering for their quality of life. Chronic pain doesn't just affect the body. It leaves deep emotional, cognitive, and social imprints. Research shows that people living with chronic pain are 4 times more likely to experience depression or anxiety, and nearly 40% suffer from clinically significant mental health challenges. All of this and more highlights just how critical it is that we approach chronic pain and the emotional rumination that often accompanies it with care, compassion, and intentional support for the whole person. With my husband as part of these statistics, I wanted to get him some relief, but appointments were hard to get. I pulled every string I could find and got us into a pain management doctor. After a few minutes of speaking with this physician, it was clear that he stereotyped my husband and I as being there solely for medication, and he literally refused to help us. In fact, he said, "I am not going to help you." He talked about the drug crisis in this country and how everyone wants drugs and how he was not going to help my husband. He said he wasn't going to help us. The person who is supposed to be the helper would not help. No options, no brainstorming, nothing. No help. I felt like I was living in a nightmare as I sat there. I realized in that moment how much power this man held over us. This doctor held all the power over us, and he had made a decision about us that was not true. We were not actually looking for a prescription per se, but he thought we were, and that was all that mattered. We were actually there to talk about a type of pain medication that could be inserted into the spine for long-term pain management, but he refused to listen to us and cut our appointment short. As we drove away from that appointment, with tears stinging my eyes, I ruminated negatively. Boy, did I negatively ruminate. I felt like there was no hope for relief for my husband, and I kept going over and over and over the events of that short appointment in my head. I had endless conversations within my head where I defended my and my husband's intentions and reputation, but all of that ruminating really got me nowhere in the end and pulled energy away from the task at hand to help my husband get the relief he needed. So, let's begin with a clear definition of ruminating. Negative ruminating happens when we fixate on our thoughts, especially negative ones, without reaching any resolution. It's like being on a hamster wheel in your mind. Lots of effort, going in circles, no forward movement. We replay the same scene, the same feeling, the same fear, the same annoyance. We worry that we said too much, or too little, or not enough, or even that we said anything at all. It's the negative, repetitive hyper-focus that is profoundly unhelpful, often actually ramping up our stress and driving us in circles instead of helping us move forward in solution-oriented, healthy ways. The cycle of care involves giving, receiving, and reciprocating care to ourselves and others. When we live with and for care, negative ruminating doesn't get to have a home in your head. When we ruminate in a negative way, we stop problem solving and moving forward and instead get trapped in an endless loop of internal noise. Our thinking just runs in circles, and that's just not productive or healthy. In contrast, when we engage in learning more about rumination through intentional research and reflection, to understand how rumination works and what types of rumination there are, we can work towards breaking the circling cycle and moving forward. This provides care for ourselves and others. We gather information, interpret and reflect on it, and choose how to act and how to move forward in a solution-oriented manner. That is what the cycle of care looks like. We don't have to live a life of continuing negative rumination patterns that are detrimental to our health and potentially adversely affecting those around us. Research from psychologist Susan Nolan-Hexma, who is a leading expert in mood regulation and mental health, has shown that negative rumination significantly increases the risk of developing depression and anxiety, particularly when it becomes a habitual way of processing emotions. Rumination often masquerades as problem solving, but instead of helping us move towards solutions, ruminating negatively traps us in cycles of negative thinking. We go over the same worries, the same regrets, or the same fears without resolution. Over time, this mental looping exacerbates feeling of helplessness, it intensifies emotional distress, and it disrupts our ability to think clearly. This negative emotional spiraling isn't without its downside. It impacts how we show up in our relationships, our work, and our care for others. When we're stuck in negative internal loops, we can shut down and become disconnected, too absorbed in our own thoughts to listen well, or we might overreact, responding from a place of tension rather than understanding. In some cases, we may even withdraw, numbing or isolating ourselves instead of engaging. That's why bringing intentional care into our thought processes is so powerful. I know how hard and painful this can be, but when we pause to truly listen, not just to our fears, but to our full emotional landscape, we start to interpret our experiences more accurately. We see patterns, we notice needs, we create space for clarity, healing, and forward movement. This shift from spinning in negative rumination loops to proactively moving forward with care is core to the thinking and responding elements of the cycle of care. It's what allows us to break free from this circular thinking and move toward thoughtful, forward-moving, solution-oriented action. Understanding that rumination comes in different forms can help us identify our patterns and shift them more effectively. Here are the 4 main types of rumination. The first is brooding. This is the most harmful form of rumination. It involves passive and negative thinking, often focused on self-criticism, feelings of helplessness, or comparing yourself to others. People stuck in brooding tend to dwell on problems rather than actively seeking solutions, which can deepen depression and erode self-esteem. In the cycle of care, brooding blocks the ability to gather meaningful insights and prevents us from hearing or responding to what we or others truly need. Next, we have reflection. Reflection is more neutral, and it can be helpful when it's purposeful. This form of rumination involves analyzing situations to gain clarity or insight. However, if we get stuck in this phase, continuing to turn ideas over without action, it can become paralyzing. Within the cycle of care, reflection that leads to clarity and response is productive. But if it becomes a feedback loop without resolution, it disrupts movement forward. The third type is intrusive rumination. These are involuntary, distressing thoughts that often stem from trauma or intense stress. They can feel like mental intrusions, coming up uninvited and repeatedly. This type of rumination can overwhelm the listening and thinking stages of the cycle of care, making it difficult to be present for ourselves or others. Recognizing intrusive thoughts and learning to ground ourselves is key in regaining emotional clarity and reconnecting to care. It may also be necessary to seek professional help to deal with intrusive rumination. And last of all, deliberate rumination. This is the most intentional and potentially beneficial type of rumination. It involves thoughtfully revisiting an issue or experience to learn from it or chart a way forward. While it still requires emotional effort, deliberate rumination supports movement in the cycle of care. It's reflective thinking that leads to purposeful responding and helps build resilience through learning and insight. Deliberate rumination often happens when we've had some distance from an emotionally charged event and can re-engage with it more calmly and constructively. Rather than spiraling into blame or shame, this kind of thinking involves identifying what went wrong, what we learned, and how we might do things differently next time. It's the difference between ruminating to relive pain versus ruminating to grow. In the cycle of care, deliberate rumination fuels our thinking and responding phases. It allows us to reflect, not just for reflection's sake, but to truly understand and act from a place of care. This kind of thoughtful engagement with our experiences can lead to stronger relationships, more attuned decision-making, and a deeper alignment between our values and our actions. When we understand which type of rumination we're engaging in, we can respond more appropriately and compassionately to ourselves and others. The goal isn't to shut down our thoughts, but to use them to care for ourselves and others in ways that make the world a better place. So today we ask, how can we shift out of ruminating negatively and into forward movement that is solution-oriented? How can we listen to ourselves and respond to our situations with care instead of getting trapped in internal loops? Well, one thing that's helped me is the following activity for today. It is called Stop the Spin. Notice, reflect, respond. This activity is designed to help you notice when you're ruminating in a negative way and gently shift toward reflective movement forward. You can do this through journaling or just taking a few quiet minutes for yourself. First, take a deep breath and simply notice. What is a thought that keeps looping in your mind lately? Build an awareness of it. Be aware of it, and even consider writing it down if you are able and if it is helpful. Don't filter it, just let it out. Second, reflect. Here are some questions to help with that reflection. Is this thought helping me? Is it helping me provide care to myself or to someone else? What emotion comes up when I think about this? Is this thought rooted in truth, or is it influenced by something else like fear, assumptions, stereotypes, habits? And when I'm really struggling and do not even have the brain energy to think about all those questions, I just simply say, this isn't healthy. What would be healthy? This isn't healthy. What would be healthy? I use this mantra to try to break the negative rumination loop I'm in. This isn't healthy. What would be healthy? And last of all, we respond, asking ourselves, what is one small step I can take to move forward? A step forward can be something simple like, can I just breathe? Can I drink some water, go for a walk, connect with a good friend, rest, nap? Try to quiet the storm in your mind and ask yourself, what would be helpful to you to move forward? The visual I like to use is from the recent movie Barbie. At one point in the movie, Barbie sits on a bench and breathes deeply, closes her eyes, quiets her mind, and just listens. The world and all its noise melts away as she focuses in and just listens. Do we care for ourselves as well as we care for others? What would I say to a friend who shared this thought with me? And you could consider continuing to respond by asking, this isn't healthy. What would be healthy? This isn't healthy. What would be healthy? Or you could create your own mantra that works for you. This process honors the thinking component in the cycle of care. Instead of bypassing or ignoring what we're feeling, we care for ourselves, honor who we are, hold space for emotions, try to interpret what those emotions might be telling us, and then consider how to respond with care. So take a moment for yourself. Give yourself some space to breathe. You don't have to figure skate yourself into an endless death spiral of negative ruminating thoughts. I've spent way too much time doing that. If your ruminating thoughts are not a value add to your life, you can ask yourself, this isn't healthy. What would be healthy? The goal isn't to force action, but rather to gently make sure that our thinking supports us, rather than projecting, ignoring, or spiraling us away from caring for ourselves and others. Now we've come to our time today where we talk about our cycle of care superhero. Today's cycle of care superhero is a dear friend of mine, someone who also happens to be a deeply gifted coach. She has a remarkable ability to show up for others in their most tangled moments, especially when they're caught in the spiral of negative, ruminating thoughts. What makes her care so powerful is not just her wisdom, but the way she creates space. She doesn't rush to fix, advise, or distract. Instead, she invites stillness. When someone comes to her overloaded or emotionally flooded, she doesn't try to fill the silence. She honors the silence. In fact, she encourages people to slow down, to stop talking for a moment, and to simply sit in quiet and listen. Listen to be with what's true in their body, their mind, and their spirit. In doing so, she models one of the deepest forms of care, the belief that we already carry the knowledge we need within ourselves. She lives what she asks of others, practicing quietude, listening deeply, and asking thoughtful, open questions. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy with her. She differentiates with care, sensing what each person uniquely needs, listening for what each person uniquely needs, whether it's validation, challenge, stillness, or encouragement. Her way of coaching beautifully mirrors the listening and thinking stages of the cycle of care. She holds space for others to notice what's really going on beneath the surface and empowers them to respond, not out of panic or pressure, but with clarity and groundedness. She reminds me and all those she works with that we are not powerless in the face of rumination. When someone like her shows up with deep care and presence, it becomes easier to pause, to hear ourselves again, and to step forward with purpose. She is a living example of what it means to care through quiet, and that is why she is today's Cycle of Care superhero. Thank you, Shelley, for all you do to bring care into the world. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Cycle of Care podcast. Today, we explored how rumination, those repetitive, circular thought patterns, can potentially hold us back from healing, clarity, and forward movement. We talked about how ruminating negatively can drain our energy, cloud our thinking, and pull us away from the kind of intentional care we want to offer ourselves and others. We also named and explored the 4 different types of rumination and looked at how shifting into reflective, deliberate thought can move us forward instead of keeping us stuck. I shared my own experience with watching my husband go through a difficult period of chronic pain, a situation that honestly spiraled us into helplessness, anxiety, hopelessness, and emotional exhaustion. The ending to that story is that eventually we broke the cycle of anxious ruminating about the doctor that had judged us negatively and wouldn't help us through channeling the energy we were using to ruminate into finding a compassionate practitioner who saw us for who we were. She believed us and helped my husband manage his pain until he healed and no longer suffered from this pain anymore. Unlike so many others in our world, there are so many who suffer from chronic pain and need to be cared for through support and help, not stereotyping and judgmental responses. Sharing this story with you was hard for me to do. Breaking that cycle of negative rumination allowed me to share this story, to raise awareness and challenge the harmful stereotypes that so often surround chronic pain, especially because so many continue to suffer in silence. It also gave me back my voice. And I guess I'm hopeful that my story might help someone else find their voice too, to tell their story. Today, we also celebrated our Cycle of Care superhero, Shelley, a wise and super compassionate coach who models what it looks like to support others through deep listening, quiet presence, and belief in each person's inner wisdom. Her courage in asking people to be still and listen is changing the world in powerful ways. If this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate, review, or share it with a friend. You never know who might be caught in a negative rumination loop today and need to hear that there's a way forward. They're not alone. My mantra is to repeat over and over, this isn't helpful, what would be helpful? This isn't helpful, what would be helpful? Does this mantra work for you? If not, what mantra would work for you to help you live your best life, offering the deepest and most profound care to yourself and those around you? You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or at my website, monazignego.com, and you can learn even more about care, reflection, and transformative teaching in my book, Transforming Teaching Through the Cycle of Care. Thanks again for listening. I'm Mona Zignego, and this is the Cycle of Care podcast. Until next time, pause, breathe, and keep moving forward with care You've got this. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Take care.